Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Angela Merkel is becoming more and more some kind of a problem for her CDU party. While in previous years the party, especially in local elections, were using the relative popularity of our glorious leader in order to boost their chances for the elections, and at the same time she got very favorable media reporting. Journalists loved her. Right now, there are more and more voices in the center-cuck camp who think that Merkel is somewhat of a problem, and her staying in power for that long is problematic for the CDU. In today's video, I want to present these voices, and I also want to describe and explain why this is happening and that this has to be seen in a broader context. I reported about this, for example, in autumn in the year 2018 already. It was also the case that the CDU lost a lot of votes in a regional election back then. I think it was Hesse. And Angela Merkel got under pressure. Now back then, if you still remember correctly, if you follow my channel since then, you might know that AKK, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, Angela Merkel's Western German puppet, was installed at the head of the CDU party in her place. It was kind of a partial retreat of Angela Merkel. While she stayed in power as chancellor, she stepped down from her party office, from her office as chairman woman thing, in order to make people believe that she actually wanted to take some responsibility for the losses there. Installing AKK was just a diversion that was intended to get Angela Merkel out of the line of fire so her policies can be pursued as before. And as you know, I also reported about that and I explained that to you, that Germans in times of a perceived crisis, they tend to stick together. It is something we call Burgfrieden, or some people call it like that. Maybe I explained that term in another video. It's quite interesting actually, but that just means that if we think that we're under attack or if there is a problem that we need to deal with, then we kind of stick together and we also want to maintain the status quo and not experiment so much. That was good for the CDU in the polls, but now it's not anymore because the public thinks that the so-called crisis that we have at the moment is not handled very well by the CDU anymore. And now they cannot do such a diversion maneuver such as in 2018 for a second time. So what to do now? Now at this point I want to show you some of the articles, some of the voices that were coming up that were criticizing Merkel. There is the historian Professor Andreas Röder, for example, who sums up Merkel's style quite well, I think. He says that for 16 years Angela Merkel was navigating Germany from crisis to crisis, abruptly changing her opinion, changing course. For example, when it comes to nuclear power, when it comes to family policy, when it comes to migration, and now with this health crisis. We always saw that Merkel created a crisis and then she used that crisis in order to abruptly change the course of policy and then tell people, oh, because of this crisis that came over us like a natural disaster or something, we have no other choice but to do that. And in Germany, you called that alternativlos. It's an adjective that means without an alternative to it. It means that her course of action is the only reasonable, the only conceivable course of action, and that inspired the name of the only real opposition party in Germany, of course, the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD, the alternative for Germany. It was the idea that yes, there are alternatives, there are other options, there are other courses of action that also make sense, not only what Angela Merkel dictates to the German public. So I find what Mr. Röder says quite fitting. It is very clear that Angela Merkel always needed some kind of a crisis situation. She needed that in order to get what she wanted in politics. In a sense, Angela Merkel is a one-trick pony that just knows how Germany reacts to a perceived crisis or when they think that they are under threat and there is a problem that needs to be dealt with. We Germans have a capacity for enduring a lot of hardship when we think it is necessary, and we are very tolerant when it comes to that. So Angela Merkel understood that, and under normal circumstances, Germans would never have accepted all these things. But when we think that there is a crisis, and when the politicians and the media, when they all make us believe that there is some danger, then we go along with it. But there are some indications, as I said, that this game can no longer be played infinitely. So what else happened? Public broadcasting were raising doubts about Angela Merkel's promise that until before the federal election, that is, until September 2021, Angela Merkel said that every German will receive an offer to get a pharmaceutical product that will keep them safe from harm. But the way that the logistics situation looks like right now, they are raising doubts if this promise can be kept at all. And they did that not in some obscure show at 11 p.m. at night. No, they said that on March the 13th in front of millions of viewers. So the ARD Tagesschau is one of the biggest news formats in Germany, if not the biggest one, I think. So that means that public broadcasting is also now attacking or questioning Angela Merkel's promises directly. As a consequence, the CDU as a whole party is not doing so well. They're doing as bad in the polls now as they did before this so-called crisis was brought upon us. And this leads now, for example, the powerful newspaper Welt with Ulf Poschardt, the chief editor, to say that Armin Laschet and the CDU party, they must make sure that Merkel goes away now, or that she retreats or steps down. But what does that really mean when he says that? Imagine that. It is the end of March right now, and in the fall we already have elections, and Angela Merkel said she wouldn't be the next chancellor candidate anyway. So what does that mean if she steps down now? There are a couple of months effectively that she will still be in office. No, what he means is that they need to build up somebody after her right now, but that was clear anyway. That cannot be the true meaning. What he means is that Angela Merkel's politics need to go. They must distance themselves programmatically or content-wise from her. And this is something I really don't see happening. Angela Merkel made sure that there are no capable people next to her anymore in the party. She bullied and eliminated everybody who was somewhat capable or seen as a threat or as competition to her. And this is why the CDU is now a club of weak yes men and incompetent women. And most people, by the way, see Mr. Söder from Bavaria as the way more capable chancellor candidate or potential chancellor of Germany as opposed to Mr. Armin Laschet from North Rhine-Westphalia. And that is because Laschet is basically Angela Merkel's guy. So the very idea that a Mr. Laschet would turn away from the path of Angela Merkel and create his own unique new policy style for Germany is just ridiculous. And nobody expects that, by the way. So what do I think about this whole phenomenon that, well, the media and some prominent pundits are now becoming more and more critical of Angela Merkel? Well, I would say had they done the same thing 10 years ago, I would have taken them seriously. But doing this now, a couple of months before our federal election, when Angela Merkel says after 16 years she would not be the candidate anymore anyway, that's kind of ridiculous. I cannot take that seriously. They are just trying to fool the public. They are trying to make the Germans think as if there is a new policy coming in, when in fact nothing will change. It is like in a cheap soap opera where one of the characters just becomes a new actor, but the writing and the character remain the same. So I think in this context, the timing is more important than everything else. They are only now daring to say something against Angela Merkel when it doesn't matter anymore. And of course, nobody wants her to step down as chancellor tomorrow, because a couple of months before the election, that doesn't make any sense anyway. They only mean that her politics should be changed or something. But that is also just once again a diversion. And this time they don't want to do it by installing someone else like they did 2.5 years ago in 2018 by installing Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. Now they are trying to fool the Germans with a cheap trick, with a plot twist, with some kind of a stage play. And I think that they want to prepare the Germans for a red-green coalition in the fall. There will be a Green Party, socialist, communist coalition. That is at least what the media and the political establishment want right now, probably under a green chancellor. But that is something for another video. I want to leave it at that right now. Thank you all for listening, but most of all, I want to thank all my supporters and my subscribers. If you like this kind of material, like, share and subscribe. Especially check me out on alternative social media platforms. The links are down in the descriptions below. And if you want to support my work, you can do so via PayPal, Patreon or Subscribestar. Servus, Kameraden.